Hello and welcome to Crypto Interviews. My name is Claudio and this is Cryptochain, the channel where I do crypto news, reviews, tutorials, and interviews. And today I've got Forrest, who's got the YouTube channel of Hashoshi. Once again, it's been over a year since I last invited him to my channel. He's an Ethereum developer. We don't know what he works with because it is quite secretive. You know, it's crypto, it's the dark side. It's, you know, Hashoshi, Satoshi, you get the deal, right? But welcome.
Right.
We're here to talk about Polkadot actually, and a little bit about Cardano and Cosmos, and kind of do a comparison because everybody's talking about Polkadot. I mean, it's hyped up. It's nuts.
Yeah.
And they've actually launched at the right time as well with this mini bull market, if you may call it that way.
Yeah, totally. And I think that now, especially like 2020, 2021, this is the time for all of these projects. Elrond, Cardano, Algorand, Tezos, they're all starting to deliver on a lot of the white paper stuff that they'd written out. And that includes Polkadot and Cosmos too. And so it's very interesting to see all this stuff play out.
So yeah, let's talk a little bit about Polkadot. So from my point of view, just understanding Polkadot, I mean, it took a while to digest everything, but once I started doing some digging into it, I've actually come to the conclusion that you could compare it maybe to the like Ethereum in a way, if you want to compare it to that. And then you've got the Parachains on Polkadot, which are kind of like the ICOs. So then when you're investing in those Parachains by voting, you're pretty much like sending your Ethereum to get those tokens, except you're sending DOT, but you're not really sending them because you're locking them. So you're locking them, but you're locking them for 2 years. So that means you get them back, but you also get the tokens from that token sale, right? But instead of a token sale, it is called an IPO, initial parachain offering. So what do you think about that bit? Like, do you want to talk a little bit about that aspect?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's clever. The way that Polkadot is approaching this issue of interoperability is very different than maybe others have been. And so it's like, of course, you have the standard stuff. You've got the bridges between Ethereum right now and what Polkadot will be. That's pretty traditional interoperability. Where it starts to differ is that Polkadot's really trying to be the finality layer or the consensus layer for a bunch of other blockchain networks that want to talk to each other. And so to do that, you set up this common architecture and you say, you meet these basic communications criteria and you can delegate security to this Polkadot, relay chain or relay network. And then we'll take care of the rest basically at this layer. And it's all secured via, DOT and staking and, pretty interesting levels of or layers of consensus. But what's really cool about it is that you take away the fundamental problem in interoperability, and that is the weakest link problem, where if you have a blockchain, right? Let's just say blockchain A, and it has quick finality, high levels of finality. It's high integrity, and consensus is well driven, right? It works really well. High security. You have blockchain B that's pretty poor in terms of security, and it's got very low levels of finality. Generally, just not as secure, right? If you need to make it a state changing execution or execute a smart contract or facilitate swaps of tokens, for example, between those two networks, your security is only as good as the weakest link. And so instead of saying we're just going to let everyone sort of be, totally 100% sovereign, have their own consensus and not force anything upon anybody, Polkadot's basically saying we're going to create a secure layer to facilitate comms and a basic architecture so that problem is no longer viable, right? That's the biggest value prop for Polkadot, is solving that issue. So you can have a multi-chain world where you're going to do what it's supposed to do.
Wow. No, that's interesting as well. And what do you think of the Parathreads aspect of it, the pay-as-you-go kind of blockchains, if you may call them that way, for quicker projects and smaller projects maybe?
Yeah, I think that there's going to be, and admittedly, I think Polkadot has even said in some of their older blog posts, maybe 2018, 2019, said like the barrier to entry after the first series, I think like the first X number of parachains are going to be free to lock in your slot. That's to seed the network basically. But after that, you're going to have to sort of, lock up DOT, a fairly sizable amount, no less, to get it the opportunity to hold a parachain slot in Polkadot. And so that might be a little difficult for smaller projects that don't have resources to become a parachain, up front. But I think the idea is that over time the barrier will sort of lower as there are more parachains out there, and communities big for that too. You got to get people invested in your project.
Exactly, because I mean the market cap has pumped significantly, considering that it's only been launched and we don't even have auctions yet. So
Yeah.
that's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how it reacts when the auctions are live, and people are going to be staking DOT, or not staking it but locking it in order to vote for these IPOs. So we'll see how that's going to play out. It should be interesting because, I mean, how much higher could it go? I mean, of course, it could go very high, but will it overtake Ethereum? Do you think it could really be that big?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's kind of interesting because I think because of the type of space we're in and the time that we're in right now, where most things are doing pretty well. I think people are like, okay, so is Polkadot better than Ethereum, or is Polkadot better than Cardano or whatever? And in reality, in many ways, they aren't one-to-one comparable. Like, it's not apples to apples comparison, because Polkadot is a very different project than Ethereum and Cardano and Tezos and Algorand. Algorand and Cardano and Tezos and all these others very well might be a part of the Polkadot ecosystem, which makes those individual chains that much more valuable, right? Because each network does something pretty well, right? And will do certain things pretty well. Now that's like a huge issue, because if you are on that network, you can never really hold that much market share, because not everything can be done on your network. So there's not going to be this one protocol to rule them all, because that's a huge computer science issue. It's like,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
you
I see
can't
what you
make
mean.
something work for everything perfectly.
Yeah.
I don't think that solution exists. And so Polkadot is making a bet on that, that future, where you have to be able to share state, you have to be able to swap tokens, you have to be able to transact securely across multiple different blockchains that are basically independently operated and have their own use cases in and of themselves.
Yeah, and I think going forward, I mean, their idea of voting and governance and that sort of stuff, I was looking through their wallets as I was doing the tutorials, but I don't understand a lot of the stuff, and they're new to me as well. So as time goes by,
Mhm.
hopefully I'll be able to get a better grasp. But uh, their idea seems to be that the community and the validators can actually vote for any change that happens on Polkadot, be it
Mhm.
parachains, be it code changes, things like that. So I wonder if they're going to be thinking of reducing that fee as well. I mean, assuming they're going to have a specific lockup fee for parachains at the beginning, but then as time goes by and as more parachains get onboarded and the price is too high and not everyone can afford the same amount of DOT,
Mhm.
they should be able to vote for that, right? I mean, that's the idea, to make it sustainable.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to see that the community already voted to redenominate DOT. So you had the
Exactly.
old DOT, now new DOT, and it's basically like 100-to-1 stock split that happened, right? Like,
Exactly.
that is governance happening in real time. And so I think people should be pretty stoked that that worked the way it did. Usually projects are like, we're redenominating the currency,
Yeah.
get with the program, right? In this case, it was kind of like, do you think we should? Let's take a vote, basically.
Yeah.
And I think it was really cool to see that happened, albeit, the exchanges kind of messed up a little doing it, in the implementation of it, but it is what it is.
Yeah, no, definitely. I totally agree. And what's interesting now is the fact that they've got this testing ground, or the canary network, as you could call it, which is Kusama,
Hmm.
where projects can deploy on there first, test their network out, and then get onto Polkadot eventually. But what I
Yeah.
don't really understand how it'll work with Kusama is, will there be parachain voting for Kusama first, or can they just deploy on Kusama and then they can test them out? I mean, do they need people to stake Kusama or lock Kusama in order to give them some kind of token? I don't know. How do you think that's going to work, or do you know how it works?
I'm not sure, to be honest, but I will say that Kusama was one of the smartest moves, because you've taken something that is not totally like audited, and is not totally like formally verified and tested the same way that a like a true finalized protocol would be, and you market it that way and say, hey, this is like the bleeding edge canary release, expect there to be issues. And like, if you look at it, like people love it, like people are using it, and it's a great proving ground for projects that will eventually want to be initial parachains on Polkadot to like prove out their concept and test. And the biggest thing is that, you know, the original work that was done for Polkadot was actually building out the substrate framework, the architecture that speeds up the process of building a Polkadot compatible blockchain network that has your own parameters, right? So they're like, they've lowered the barrier to entry to build your own blockchain first and foremost with, you know, compatibility, which doesn't have to be part of Polkadot. That's the thing I don't think people realize. Like, you can build something with Substrate and never interact with Polkadot at all. And like, it can be a standalone blockchain. So it's like almost like a charity framework in that regard. But it also does mean that if down the line it makes sense to be on Polkadot, then you can do it. And so this is, I think, part of the strategy. And it may be documented somewhere, and I may be thinking that I've, you know, figured this out secretly, but it may not be a secret. But putting out Substrate early means that there's a chance that even if certain blockchain protocol developers didn't want originally to be a part of Polkadot, later they could choose to because they're compatible, because they're using Substrate.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it gives you a better chance that down the line, as Polkadot grows, there'll be more people ready to just plug into the ecosystem from scratch.
Wow.
You know?
Yeah, and they're making everything configurable as well. So that should be interesting. I wonder how much can you actually scale your parachain on Polkadot? And I mean, they're saying it's configurable, but I'm sure there has to be some kind of limitation at the moment. I mean, who knows, in the near future, maybe we're going to see changes. But what's interesting,
Mm-hmm.
and the reason I asked you about Kusama, is that I'm following this project very closely, who Polkadot have actually invested in. They're called Akala Network. You've probably
Yep.
heard of them. They're a DeFi. They're working at the moment in their testnet. They haven't deployed on Kusama yet, but they're planning to in Q4 of 2020. And they said when they deploy on Kusama, they're going to be called Karura there. And they're going to be giving KAOR tokens to those that are locking KSM Kusama in order for
Mm-hmm.
them to launch on Kusama. So that brings the question, will all parachains then have this kind of token system? And if so, what would be the use case? Because like with Kusama, at the beginning we thought, okay, what's the use case for having the KSM token? It's just a testing ground, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not the mainnet version of the whole ecosystem. So what do you think could be the use case in that case? Do you think that's going to be like I don't know, a money steal in a way, to have this kind of testing grounds and then to distribute tokens for them? Do you see any kind of use case in that aspect?
I mean, it's hard to say. I think that it's very possible, if not likely, that even when Polkadot is done, right? And when I say done, I mean the first phase, or like the first version is out there and they started, like it's public, then there will be some migration over to Polkadot. But I think because Kusama has been around for a while and people use it, people like it, there are plenty of projects on there that might not ever actually go to Polkadot because you're happy where they are. I think it could very well survive completely separate and apart from Polkadot and sort of turn into like a kind of like the relationship between Parity and Ethereum, except Parity really went down like the enterprise and like, you know, private network route. But it could very well still exist separate and apart and build new features on top of
Okay,
what the,
that
you
would
know, the
make
canary
sense then
version
to have that.
was.
Yeah, so that would make sense then to have that, because then you'd have an independent network. Like Karura could be something independent helping Akala for
Hmm.
when they go on mainnet on Polkadot. Okay, so that would make sense.
Yeah.
Also, one thing I noticed with Polkadot is that not everything will be a parachain on there, right? Some of them, like Chainx, they're building like a connector, I believe, to try and help
Yeah. It's a
communication.
bridge.
It's a bridge between various blockchains as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, and that's one of the critical elements there is it's like you want to create something where you have perfect interoperability, where you have, you know, trustless state sharing, or, you know, you have the ability to execute smart contracts in a way that can happen between multiple different blockchains, things like that. And that's great, but there will also be instances where you need sort of like a halfway there version of that, where you build out a bridge that does some of those things, right? And so if you look at some of the Polkadot documents, the documentation, you'll see like there's reference all over the place to instances where there might be fully interoperable, built on substrate blockchains that delegate security to the Polkadot consensus layer. And then there are some that will kind of be half in, half out. There'll be some that are really separate and sovereign completely. And it's very interesting to see like how they envision the future of blockchain and crypto.
Yeah. And what's interesting is what I've noticed on my channel when I did the review of Polkadot, a lot of the newbies in the space have commented and have joined my Telegram group. I mean, people that have been in this space in like Q2 of 2020 and they've heard of Polkadot.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems that Polkadot attracted them to the crypto space, which is really weird. You know, you'd think Bitcoin would be the one, or maybe Ethereum or something else. But yeah, I mean, it's shocking. And it just shows you it is
Yeah.
really revolutionary. But now to kind of sway towards Cardano, because Cardano is obviously an older project that have been developing behind the scenes with a great
Mm-hmm.
team. I mean, how do you see Cardano performing? How much longer do you think it'll take them before they'll deploy? I think it's called Goguen, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
The third phase, which is the
Yeah,
important one
Gogan.
because it's related with smart contracts. And also, do they have a testing ground like Kusama, for example, for Polkadot with Cardano?
So in terms of the testing ground, they have like playgrounds that you can test the Plutus language, their smart contract language, functional language. And then they also have a playground for Marlo, which is their domain specific language. That's like a graphical user interface abstraction of the Haskell based scripting language. And so you can use that to drag and drop logical blocks and make compliant smart contracts without having technical skills. So like they have those two things. I would estimate they'll probably have like a real formal test net of like Cardano, the network, live probably within the next month or two, with all the smart contract stuff. That's my guess. And then I would estimate that they would probably be aiming to have the actual Goguen mainnet release towards the end of the last quarter of the year. So like probably December, conservatively, probably like the first part of next year. That's my estimate. It's very possible that they beat that estimate, but it really just depends on how testnets go, and you never can really predict how they'll go, you know?
Yeah, for sure. But how do you see, I mean, Cardano competing with someone like Polkadot, for example? How would they differ? What would motivate people, in your opinion, to build on Cardano? I know they've been around longer, but I mean, Polkadot have been around since 2017 as well, haven't they? They've been building quietly.
Mm-hmm.
But how would you see the difference between the two? What would really differ them, would you say?
I mean, I think that again, they're different. Like the accessibility layer within Cardano is looking like a differentiator, right? That Marlowe language, I think, is pretty powerful. I think the fact that a lot of financial services traditionally have used the Haskell programming language that is really the basis for um, the Plutus language for smart contracts in Cardano. And so it could very well be one of the major blockchain networks that takes on more of the finance, fintech, versions of things that exist already in industry. Like it could very well be that Cardano is the blockchain that brings the New York finance, the San Francisco finance back into the blockchain space, because largely companies have kind of gotten out, like the insurers, the like all that traditional finance stuff, they've kind of backed away after 2017. So maybe I think Cardano seems a little tailored for those types of use cases along with Algorand. But in terms of its relationship to Polkadot, I don't know that they're direct competitors, because in many ways, Polkadot itself isn't really like a feature set or like a blockchain in the same way that we would like review another blockchain. Like, let's look at the scripting language. Let's look at the core consensus. It's really like an internet protocol layer for all these other blockchains that exist that are going to have their own features. And so my hope is that these big blockchains like Algorand, like Tezos, like Ethereum, et cetera, continue to push to interoperate using something like Polkadot. And that would be the ideal thing for people to do, because then you can, if you need to use the Cardano network for something, you can do that, but you're not cutting yourself off from all the other options that are out there. Like that is what the future should be,
Yeah,
in my opinion.
interconnecting everything using oracles. And yeah, because I mean Polkadot are going to do that, aren't they? They're going to use Chainlink to interconnect other blockchains. So I
Mm-hmm.
wonder if they're going to have the same with Cardano, for example. What's your take on Cosmos then? Do you see Cosmos as being more of a competitor for Polkadot, or would
Yeah,
you say
definitely a
more of a
competitor.
competitor for Cardano?
Yeah, definitely a competitor for Polkadot. And you know, there are others that are doing interoperability. I think OneChain is doing it. Icon is doing it. So like there are a lot of other players that are doing interoperability, and ultimately, I don't even know that it means that one can succeed and all the rest have to fail. I have a feeling we might see a conglomeration of a lot of the work that each of these individual projects are doing. And there'll be a couple that really win out, and then they will sort of merge their tech together in many ways. We shall see.
Yeah,
But I think with Cosmos, their approach is slightly different in the sense that they're less so saying create your own blockchain that has its own consensus and has basically everything is sovereign from this like interoperability layer. They're saying like that, let's sort of, I'm not even going to say like standardize everything, but it's a little bit more strict in its structure. So like instead of saying we're just going to port Ethereum through this layer, they basically have created now, or there is a sanctioned and created new Ethereum blockchain clone, basically proof of stake, super scalable and clean and fully interoperable with all the Ethereum dev tools and user experience tools and all that sort of thing, called Ethermint. And so now that's in the Cosmos space and it's ready to rock and roll. And I'm sitting there thinking that, you know, if I'm a DeFi project and I'm building in testnet for Ethereum, I'm like almost all the way there. I'm ready to go to mainnet. I'm looking at the fees now and I'm saying, we can't do this. Like we can't, either the users aren't going to use it because it costs too much, or we can't operate because it costs too much.
yeah,
So what do? You go somewhere that has a functional network that you can port to. That's like the easiest thing in the world, because they probably don't have to change anything. They can probably take everything they have and plug it into this Ethermint network.
yeah,
I mean, that's about as good as it gets. And that's where Cosmos has an advantage right now, I think, because they're kind of ready for that to happen. Like there's more ready to go
yeah.
for Cosmos now than there is for Polkadot. And that's not a cut at Polkadot, it's just the truth.
Yeah, definitely. And they've been around. I mean, they've launched earlier as well. So they
Mm-hmm.
have that edge. What about Quant? I mean, Quant Network has been really hyped back in 2018. I remember looking into that, and their
Mm-hmm.
tokenomics are good as well, apart from the tech, which is similar to Cosmos from what I read. Their
Mm-hmm.
tokenomics are actually deflationary, their coins. So that's actually really bullish. So I wonder what's going on with them. Are you up to date with what's happening or?
Only generally. I mean, but I agree with you. I think that in many ways there's a lot of similarities between Cosmos and Quant. And I also think that what's interesting is that right around that time where 2017 and 2018 started to like, we started to have this like retraction, I think some of the best like technology was being born out of that like crazy bubble burst. Again, there were a lot of people, you know, like Gavin Wood from Polkadot. You know, that's a great example. It's like you look at what you've created, and you know he helped create Ethereum, obviously, and everything that Ethereum had to offer in Solidity. And I'm sure he looks at that and says, okay, well, how can we make this better? But not just make this better and make another blockchain that just competes with everyone. Can we make something that's going to make other blockchains better and make this ecosystem work the way that it was intended to? Because I think that's the big thing, is like even on this call, like we're talking about these different protocols and platforms and things.
Yeah,
And if what happens in the future works out properly, we probably won't be talking about all these disparate networks that don't talk to each other. It will be, hey, like that blockchain is individual, but also part of a larger network.
Yeah, I agree with
That's
that.
what I hope. I
Yeah,
really do, because it gets tiring, and I get why, because people are emotionally tied to something that they are invested in and believe
exactly.
financially and mentally.
Yeah,
But at the same time, we need to get to the place where we realize that not every blockchain is going to succeed, and the ones that do succeed will not do everything. And so hopefully we can find a place or a middle ground where people are like, okay, Cardano has merit for this reason, and Algorand is going to be good for this, and Ethereum is going to exist for these purposes, and then kind of live by that.
yeah. Unfortunately, the amount of time, I mean, most of the times that when we look on Telegram and we go to different groups, we see people just caring about the price too much and not so much about the tech.
Hmm.
But I mean, sometimes they'll think of following the tech if they think that the price is going to grow due to that tech, right? Because I mean, a lot of the scams are starting to show up as well nowadays, trying to ride the
Hmm.
DeFi wave, as you've probably seen on Twitter. So, hashtag DeFi and it pumps 10x, so it's
Yeah.
crazy. Like,
Well,
and,
yeah. I
and
mean,
what do you think about DeFi? I mean, I actually wanted to ask you about this because this is my personal opinion. So one of the limitations that we have with DeFi at the moment is that the collateral always has to be larger than the amount of funds you're loaning, minus the fee that the project needs to earn, of course, in case you're not paying back that loan. So how do you
mhm.
think they can actually overcome that situation? Because if you want to buy, let's say, a house or something, right, you want to take a bigger loan. Obviously, you don't have the kind of collateral, because if you did, you just go with that money, right? You wouldn't need to take a loan. So how do you think they can actually overcome that with DeFi to actually make it mainstream? How can
Yeah.
you
I mean,
prove that somebody's going to pay back the loan? Because that's the challenge, isn't it?
yeah, for sure. And I think the one example I have of someone trying to solve that problem is like the idea of a flash loan. Like the Aave folks, they were like, how can we guarantee that we can remove counterparty risk, but also give people access to lending? And so they're like, well, at every block cycle, that's when you get finality. And so if you can make an arbitrage trade in the time that it takes for a block to be mined, basically. So within one transaction cycle, you can get us you can either get us our money back or prove that you can't. And then it's a wash, right?
Yeah.
So either you win or you win and you just don't win big? So I think that's really cool. And I think those types of things are going to be really important. But I also think that instances where you can eliminate collateral altogether are probably going to be minimal, because that's just kind of like that's the nature of the beast. In terms of like loans where you actually like collect crypto to freely use for a longer period of time, I think it'd be really tough to eliminate needs for collateral of any kind. You could potentially, though, open it up to more types of collateral, which would be very helpful. So being able to bridge the physical to digital world gap and say, I can, you know, I'll put up my phone as collateral for crypto, and that could be somehow enforced. That would be interesting. But like even that, I don't know mechanically how you would do it.
Yeah.
So it's really tough, to be honest.
It might be
But
easier to
DeFi
do at a
is
country
amazing.
level, I guess, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. But then it's
Government.
like again, like you look at DeFi and you think 6 to 7 billion in cap, in like value now, potentially trillions of dollars worth of value later, but only if certain things happen. Like people need to realize like even Uniswap is going to need some components that are pseudo centralized or centralized to make them viable for market. And like you can even see that like if you go on Uniswap now and you go to like buy like Mantra DAO, like
Yeah,
OM,
yeah.
you go and you click on the main, like the sanctioned, quote unquote, the sanctioned contract to make your swap, and it just pops up and says, hey, like just letting you know anyone can post a pair, don't get scammed. Like the reason that's necessary is because it's so easy, and because it's decentralized, you can just post a pair that's completely fraudulent, and if no one checks,
Wow.
there you go, free
A
money for
fake
you,
smart
you know?
contract, basically, right?
Yeah, and so to that end, there will be elements of DeFi that will be pseudo centralized, and so I think people in this space have to understand that. Um, I'm not saying that we need to like replace decentralized elements with centralized elements purposefully, but there will be some compromise
Yeah, yeah.
when this stuff goes mainstream.
No, definitely. And another thing that I wanted to say, now that you mentioned Uniswap, the fees are extremely high over there. And there's actually
Hmm.
jokes on Twitter about people being charged 40, $50 for buying like $20 worth of X token. Right. I
Yeah,
mean, they're basically routing the information, generating a transaction, rerouting. I haven't personally used it, but people in my community did, and they said, I'm never going to use it again. I mean, they just felt like they were scammed, basically. So they'd rather go to
yeah,
another exchange like IDEX maybe, or a centralized exchange, even if it's a smaller one, just to avoid that hassle.
yeah. I mean, I think that the benefit of Uniswap is that you don't have to go through an exchange. So like in this instances where um you don't have access to a pair, right? At
Yeah,
all. You can't get it.
yeah,
Then it's like you have no choice, but Uniswap now makes it possible to get those things without going direct, which if you miss the sale, a lot of times you're kind of screwed anyways, because there's no exchange pair for a lot of these different newer coins. And
true.
that's how people get left behind. So I think it's a great like like playing field leveler in the sense that now normal people, average people, non-accredited people, they have, if they miss a token sale, the ability to get in early if they believe in a project, which is great.
Yeah,
But that does mean that Ethereum is the limiting force in that, because Ethereum's fees are just generally freaking high,
yeah,
And so like there are tricks to like getting better rates and reducing slippage and doing all these different things on Uniswap to help it cost less. But ultimately, there's a base level that's just not going to get fixed because Ethereum is congested. And so it's going to be interesting to see, to say the least, what happens with Ethereum and Uniswap and all these different DeFi products over the next year. Like I think a lot are going to probably check out greener pastures, especially new ones. And so we shall see. But I love Uniswap. I mean, I used it today. Yeah, I was like maybe a $60 transaction, and my fees were like $6,
yeah.
and that was like well optimized.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think it depends what you get into. I mean, these guys were telling me that those were tokens that were just listed and there was hype for those tokens. So people are constantly generating transactions. So
Hmm.
perhaps that's the reason. But yeah, I mean, with Ethereum proof of stake, I mean, do you think that's going to be sorted at some point, or will the fees still be high?
No, I think it will fix the issues, but the problem is that a functional Ethereum 2.0, that's 2022, 2023.
Okay, so it's way,
Like an Ethereum
way, way.
2.0 that you can deploy a smart contract to and that you can facilitate transactions on across shards, like that's not close.
Okay.
Having the ability to stake, like if you got 32 ETH or you want to, participate in proof of stake, that will happen probably in 2020. But the rest of it, I mean, that's a ways away. And so I think people need to quell their expectations of what Ethereum is doing. And I know I campaign this around a lot. People have probably heard it if they've watched my channel before, but Ethereum has the hardest job out of any protocol and any project out there, bar none, because they have to make something that is better in every way than what they have now in proof of work mainnet.
Yeah.
But they also have to maintain backwards compatibility to the greatest degree possible so that all this like collateral and developer mindshare and stuff that they've built in this ecosystem over the last 5 years doesn't just get flushed. And that is really, 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 really hard to do. I mean, if you ask anyone, like if you go back to the days of the internet, like if we needed to go back and re-architect some core component of our internet infrastructure today, it would be a huge lift because you need to be backwards compatible. Everything needs to work. That stuff takes 5-10 years to do.
Yeah.
And so I think people just need to be patient. And if Ethereum, loses market share, which they will, in my opinion,
Probably to Polkadot.
that's okay. Like that is okay. Like if you look at the market today, Ethereum is the undisputed like owner of the dApp space. Like no one
That's
is
true.
even holding a candle to Ethereum right now.
Yeah.
So let's welcome some much needed competition.
No, definitely.
It's a good thing. Tron and EOS, like those aren't the only game in town that can compete in the
Yeah.
dApp world. Like there's plenty out there. So let's get it.
Yeah, we'll see how Polkadot does because it's absolutely crazy. I mean, for a young project that has recently been released, it's absolutely insane. We'll see. We'll keep in touch and we'll see how things go. But I do want to ask you one last question before the end of
Do it.
this. Of course, I do thank you for talking to us about Polkadot and Cosmos and all those. But what is one thing in life that you truly desire?
That's a good question. The one thing in life I truly desire, I would say, to be honest with you, to be in a place where I'm always able to learn new stuff and to then conversely share that with others. That is the thing that I enjoy the most out of anything. If I wake up one day and I go through the entire day having not learned something or picked some new skill up or something like that, then I can't sleep. Like I need to have that. And that's why, I started the channel in the first place, is because it's a two-way, it's a bi-directional relationship. I can talk about stuff and then people in the audience, people like you're always teaching me something new or telling me about something I didn't know about. And so that's the thing that I love the most.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's amazing. And crypto offers us that as well. I mean, I've been amazed since I've joined this space in 2017. I didn't know too much back then, but in 2018, I've really started picking up on things. And it's amazing how much you learn and how many technologies are showing up, popping up all of a sudden with innovation technologies, innovation ideas, and things like that. So definitely. Cool. Thank you very much, Forrest, for joining. And by the way, if you haven't already heard of Hashoshi's channel or Forrest, do check it out. It's in the pinned comment below this video. And don't forget to give them a sub. And don't forget to, of course, if you're new here, subscribe to my channel and like the video if you enjoyed this conversation. Of course, if you have any kind of questions, drop them below and we'll be happy to answer. Thank you very much for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.
Cheers.